All right, a couple picks for you before we start the pod today. Like Cleveland, given 4.5 against Sacramento. Cleveland's one of the best teams in the NBA over the last 2 weeks. I think it's like 12 or 13 or something they've won. They've struggled against Sacramento in the past, but I just don't think this is the same Kings team as last year. I think they're kind of soft in the way that Cleveland has been going at home, heading towards the All-Star break. I think they probably see an opportunity with Embiid being out to continue to move up in the standings. And this tends to be a pretty big game for them all of a sudden. So I really like them here at this spot, 4.5. The other game I really kind of like is Golden State. They're getting 1.5, some places 2 points against the Nets. I think this is a Brooklyn team that is limping into the All-Star break. I think this is NBA trade deadline week, and I think there are guys on that team that's going to have one eye on what's going on and one eye on the court, and there's going to be a lack of focus. I don't think Golden State is kind of living in the same world. I don't think they have a ton of guys in danger of being traded because of their contract situation there. So I see this as, and Golden State's going to be pissed off after a pretty difficult loss the other night. So I like the Warriors. Curry had 60 and lost in overtime the other night. I think he's going to be ready to go, and I don't think this one's going to be all that close. So I like the Warriors getting to, and I like Cleveland giving 4.5.
You're listening to
They're gonna call it a hard foul. They're gonna call it a hard foul.
offering in-depth analysis on all things Boston Celtics with your hosts, Jim and Mike Quigley.
All right, here we are coming off heels of Marcus Smart's return to the Garden last night. Unfortunately not playing, but a sweet night all the way around. Great tribute from the Celtics. Great job of the Celtics fans. The hero amongst us was a really nice touch last night. And we will get into Marcus Smart. And, we do questions at the end of the show. It will be Marcus Smart centered to just kind of, throw a cherry on top of what was a nice night last night for a guy that deserved the reception he got. But, Mike, there's other things to talk about. And I don't think we can really get much out of last night's victory against Memphis. Memphis had, 11 players out, something ridiculous like that from their regulars. They played 4 or 5 guys on 10-day contracts. So they're barely a real NBA team. So I don't know what you take away other than, it was nice to get the starters out after 3 quarters and Jaylen Brown didn't have to dress. But there is plenty to talk about in terms of how the Celtics have been playing on this homestand. And they certainly look like a team to me, for the most part, Mike, that just wants the All-Star break to get here. And, that Lakers game was kind of the tipping point on that. And, they have been, and then I'm going to give it to you, for the majority of the season, one of the top defensive rebounding teams in the league. It's been an area that they've been really good at. And then over the course of this homestand, especially over the last 3+ games, it's really been porous to terrible. And to me, that's a team that isn't as engaged as we've seen them in the past. And, there could be a lot of reasons for that. But the problem, once you get into bad habits, is sometimes they kind of, grow and really become a problem. So, Mike, I'll give it to you, and here we go.
I agree. I agree with Charles Barkley's assessment and Gary Washburn's assessment that this team isn't in a place to not show up and pick up bad habits. They're just not. They're a team that has allowed bad habits to hurt them in the playoffs and in big moments. And I also agree that when they lose, it's not about talent. It's about execution, because they're the most talented team in the NBA. And when we were on our last pod, we were talking about how the storyline is going to be about the LA Lakers and how they're falling apart and what's going to happen to LeBron and AD. It was the Celtics who were on every national news show after that. Not after that, I don't even want to call it a performance. They didn't show up to play. They didn't care. They didn't try against the Lakers. They disrespected their opponent. They got their asses kicked by the likes of Jackson Hayes who just outworked Porzingis, who just outworked whoever was on the floor against him. That's all it was. It wasn't Jackson Hayes playing all worldly. He was just playing harder. And you give some teams some life, and suddenly they can hit threes. And you saw what happened. Russell and Austin Reeves probably hit the most of them, as I remember. But at the end of the day, the Celtics, what always concerns me about the Celtics is, are they going to be ready in these big moments? And are the habits that they pick up because they don't show up going to hurt them at the end of the year like it has in the past? That was really disappointing to see that kind of effort from this team. I was pissed off. I still am pissed off when I think about that, because it carried over from the Indiana game too. That second half against the Indiana game, outside of a few moments in the fourth quarter, and a really awesome moment by Jason
I would throw in the
Tatum
first half too, Mike. I know they scored 82 points, but their
defense,
they kept Indiana in there because they couldn't get a defensive rebound.
Yeah, and like, what's really discouraging is Tatum's playing hard, and nobody else is following suit. In the second half against the Lakers, he dived on the ground for the ball and woke up the crowd a little bit. And then you got the start of that fourth quarter. The start of that fourth quarter was fucking disgraceful, Jimmy. 3 or 4, well, they had the layup to end the third quarter, and then 3 straight layups that were all uncontested.
Off of makes too, so they weren't off
makes.
they weren't off the misses, which you understand sometimes long rebounds come out and those things happen, but those are off of makes. The Celtics scored consecutively to start the fourth quarter. They should have cut it into the lead, but they didn't get back on defense. They were off of makes. Yeah, no, it's been troubling, and the games like the Lakers game, like it is harder at times when you hear 2 players are out to get yourself up for a game. I get it. And you can lose games like that. Teams can shoot ridiculously well, and you can lose. And they may have lost anyways if they showed up to play. Like the way Reeves and Russell shot, they and Vanderbilt was hitting corner threes, they may have lost anyway. And it would have been somewhat of the same narrative. But on this pod, we would have been honest about it. We would have talked about the Lakers making shots, and the Celtics, it just wasn't their night. And over the course of 82, that happens. They didn't show up. And they didn't show up through the first 6-7 minutes, and then they played the last 3 minutes of the first quarter. The second quarter was up and down. The third quarter I thought was okay, and then I thought the first quarter was a mess. And like you said, you give teams energy when you don't box out. When there's 2 Lakers on the offensive glass and there's 1 Celtic. We want to put the blame on the big for not getting the rebound, but when the other guys aren't contributing at all, it's 2 against 1 or 3 against 2. The numbers aren't on your side on the defensive glass. Like, how does that happen? And part of the reason that happens is because the guards are getting beat. And they're getting beat off the dribble because their ball pressure sucks. And so the big has to help. And so the offensive big is now just free to fly to the glass to get the rebound because the guard didn't do his job. Or you're turning the ball over. And you're in rotation already. So when the miss happens because you turn the ball over and you're not set on the defense, no one's in position to box out. It all carries over in the effort. Everything carries over. Once you let the hand off the rope on one end, on one possession, it's going to carry over to the next defensive possession, and then it's going to carry over to the defensive rebounding. And the next thing you know, a team's in it. And they let the Pacers in the game early on in this homestand. They absolutely gave the Lakers life. Whenever the Celtics did something well in that game, they would make a mistake like we've talked about and give the Lakers life. And then the next thing you know, they're hitting a 3 offensive rebound. And credit, again, those guys, they get paid to play. It was their opportunity. The Lakers players deserve a lot of credit. I don't want to take it away from them because they could have still lost, even with a half-assed effort from the Celtics. So kudos to those players. But the Celtics, did not show up. And you saw it again last night a bit in the first quarter. Again, Memphis is not a real NBA team, so there was nothing really to take away from that effort. But, I hope it just got their eye on the All-Star break and need a break. And I hope it's not what your concern is and what Washburn and Barkley's concern is, and that these are going to be bad habits that creep up. I hope it's just a tired team, and this is the malaise of February that you see in the NBA sometimes, a lot of times, most of the times. But you guys are right in your concern that, the Celtics seem to hold on to their bad habits in the past and not let go of them. And whether it's been walking the lead up late or letting teams go on huge runs without doing anything about it. And there were times last year in the playoffs where rebounding was a concern. So
Yeah.
they have the talent in the skill to clean this up. It's a question of will they?
Yeah, and
Sorry,
I think
Mike, I interrupted you.
No, you didn't. I interrupted you. You were still going, actually. But some of it, too, for me, like, it wasn't as if LeBron and AD announced, 20 minutes before the game they weren't playing. Like, the Celtics knew for, 5 or 6 hours that those guys weren't going to play. And so when I think about a game plan and how you're going to attack a team, why are you launching 53s against the LA Lakers when their starting center is Jackson Hayes? Why isn't the game plan to post guys up, to attack the basket, and get your threes made off of rhythm? Get your threes made off of, Porzingis living in the paint. Porzingis shot 7 threes, and I think only 5 twos against the Lakers in that lineup. And to me, it was just, all of it was just poor. And I do really worry that the Celtics are way too analytically driven and don't always have a feel for how to play the right way.
Well, I tell you, in that game, too,
as
Mike.
far as the amount of threes that they're taking, I am starting to take issue that this team, because their losses, if you look at all of them, they're not shooting well from three. And so I know they've crafted a roster to give them more options on how to win, but they're not necessarily taking advantage of it when the three's not there. And so the first couple months of the season they were, and you saw a stat last night, and Scals brought it up, they're going to the basket less during the month of January.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, I think, 3 games in a row here in February where they shot 47 to 53s. I think that's too many attempts, Jim.
It could be. And, I saw Scal's stat. I didn't think the drop-off was really even noteworthy. It was 1 or 2 shots a game. So 1.5 shots. I think it's the way they play, and they've had a lot more success than they've had failure with it this season. They have the best record in basketball, and there's been games where the three hasn't gone and it's hurt them, and there's certainly been opportunities to play a different way. I don't think that game was about the three, though. I just thought it was about effort, and it was about attention to detail. Scott brought up a good point in the telecast, and we've seen this a lot in the homestand, actually, is where this team is struggling, and we'll go 4 or 5 possessions without Jason Tatum touching the ball. What is up with that? Your team's struggling. You got one of the top 10 offensive players in the world on the court, and a guy that will go downhill consistently. And worst case usually is he gets doubled and he's going to find the open man, and he's not touching the basketball. That to me is bizarre. It's bizarre. And in the second quarter, that means he's usually on the court with Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser and Neemias Queta. How is he not touching the ball? And that's happened way, way too much. Whereas I think you've been right. I think there's been on this homestand, he's been at times the only guy that has showed up in the starting 5.
What's your oh, go ahead.
I have nothing else. How much can I sit here and talk about how badly they've sucked?
I don't know, especially when they have the best record in the league. But I think for me, it's more about they're going to win their games in the regular season, but they have to be able to win other ways come postseason time. And hopefully they are able to, because their roster they generated certainly allows them to. It's a matter of playing that way. Yeah, it wasn't great against the Lakers. I mean, you think you only shot, what, 7 free throws, and Jaylen Brown didn't have any free throw attempts and all those turnovers.
Yeah, yeah.
Any concern level at all with just like the offensive inconsistency, and really the defensive inconsistency of Holiday?
I don't think Holiday's defense has been inconsistent. I think it's been pretty good for the most part. I think sometimes he gets beat by quicker guards, but that's
what I mean. Yeah,
been his MO his entire career, so you knew what you were getting there. I think offensively it's been tougher for him because he's been, a primary option throughout his entire career. And now he's what, the fourth or fifth option at best. So that has to be an adjustment. And I think he's handled it, from a character perspective as well as you could ever imagine. I don't think he takes a ton of stupid shots. I think he takes opportunities that are there for him because there isn't a ton. It might behoove the Celtics during this stretch of bad teams to maybe run some offense through him to try to get him in rhythm and kind of experiment with some different things with some of these guys. But he's been good. He's not. Maybe our expectations of him were just too high coming in because he isn't a primary option, nor should he be. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, I think you bring up a good point because against Atlanta, I definitely think this is an opportunity to post him up against Trae Young and force Atlanta to react to that, and it's going to open up shooters. Yeah, it's just interesting watching him because there's some games where he looks like he just doesn't have any legs. I wonder if they want to watch his minutes here in the second half because I guess my only concern would be him having these games in the playoffs where, he's just so bad offensively that, can you have him out there or not?
His turnovers in the clutch haven't been concerning. If there's one aspect of his game, I think there's been turnovers in the fourth quarter, late in games that, you don't want to see.
Yeah, so the Celtics, they got 5 more games here to end this All-Star break, and then we go into the break, and we have the trade deadline on Thursday, Jim. So the next 5 games, they get Atlanta here Wednesday, then on the road in Miami, and then back-to-back with Brooklyn, where we'll probably finally see a game against Ben Simmons since he's been traded. I don't think he's played against Boston since he's been traded. Not that it matters. He's not like lighting the world on fire, but just an interesting nugget there. And I would love to see the Celtics close out winning 4 or 5, but I have the same concern of you as like, are they really locked in or they have their eye on this All-Star break? So any thoughts on the trade deadline? And I know you wanted to talk about Marcus Smart.
Yeah, so we'll get to Marcus in a minute, but this schedule is kind of interesting. It's interesting how Missoula kind of handles it. I think from a fan's perspective, you want them to go win 4 or 5 or whatever. But does he kind of handle this differently? Does he kind of stagger some days off in here? Does he start experimenting with different things? You've seen the Celtics go to a zone. Do we see another type of zone? Do we see different lineups against some of these teams? Headed into the All-Star break. So I just kind of wonder what type of quality of play we're going to get. And, we saw Jaylen Brown get the night off last night. Are we going to see Holiday and Tatum as we get to this break? Especially Tatum, where he's going to be playing in the All-Star game and down there in an NBA weekend. If we're going to see like some time off for some of these guys, and maybe it won't be the best quality of basketball of the season you're going into the break, depending on what they decide to do. Yeah, and the deadline is Thursday. I think the Celtics could use, I know another big would be nice. That would help on the glass. I know a defensive wing would be good. I know those things are hard to get. I also think some guy with just, a bulldog mentality that can give you good minutes and is versatile might be nice. And I don't know if he's available, Mike, but just watching him last night and watching him, throughout this season in just games I had interest with Memphis. David Roddy plays hard. He's got some skill. He's on the perfect contract for what the Celtics are looking for. It's $2.5 million this year, $4.5 million next. And I think he would be an upgrade on their bench when you get beyond like Hauser and Pritchard. And I don't know what else more you're looking for, what's available, but I just thought he'd be a nice piece.
Yeah, I think those are the type of deals you're looking for, right? And then keeping an eye on the buyout market. There's not a lot the Celtics can do unless they trade their core. So even with that TPE, they don't have a ton of options. There's a chance the Celtics don't do anything, right? So I think the main headlines are going to come out of New York City. I expect that the Knicks are going to make another move. I do. That's a team that's in the 3 seed right now. Joel Embiid's, definitely could be out for the season. Do the Knicks see themselves as a real contender now? Could they beat Milwaukee to get to the Eastern Conference Finals? I think the way Milwaukee doesn't play
last night, they've certainly looked vulnerable.
Yeah, the way Milwaukee doesn't defend, and the way the Knicks do defend. Same with Cleveland. Cleveland's been playing well. I mean, they've just been winning and winning and winning. I would suspect that maybe they're going to try to move Karis LeVert to update their roster. Maybe bring in a real small forward to help them. But again, that's really hard to do. So the Knicks and Cleveland are 2 teams I got my eye on. And watch out for Danny Ainge in Utah. He's got a ton of picks down there. I wouldn't be surprised if he makes some sort of a move.
Yeah, Ainge could go either way, right? He could say, why am I going to buy for this team right now? We're just not going anywhere and start selling. Or he could buy if he sees the right deal. So he could definitely go in either direction, I think. And he certainly has pieces that he could sell off. I mean, Jordan Clarkson would be a nice pickup for a team that's looking for offensive punch. Someone coming off the bench. I think he's someone that instantly would help a basketball team. It's going to be interesting. And you look at the Sixers, like, what decision are they going to make? There's unfortunate for them. I don't really feel like there's any real big stars available that they can go after right now to help them stay afloat. So do they try to add with the hope of just staying in contention? But, the Embiid stuff sounds bad. Like, the surgery he had on a torn meniscus, usually you don't come back. When you do, you're usually not in a good place, as we saw with Rob. So that's not a good situation there. And it's, I don't know how they're going to handle it. I don't know who really is the big fish out on the market right now. Obviously Murray is a name to look at.
Wouldn't DeMar? I mean, if you could afford them and fit them into your roster, which would be tricky. I feel like DeMar DeRozan's a guy.
Is he available?
Use a change of scenery. I don't know if he is, but
I don't know if
the last year of his deal.
Yeah, but Chicago, like, their front office sucked so bad that, like, are they going for the 10th seed again? I don't know. I don't know if he's available. Portland obviously has Malcolm Brogdon, which would I think teams might look at. But I don't know what Memphis in terms of the injured players. Can they move Smart? I think Smart would be back at some point. So I don't know. It's I feel like the big moves have already been made, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing somebody here. Maybe it is a DeRozan that gets moved. But we'll have to see.
And Brooklyn's got to pick a direction, and it's not like they got like stars, but they got guys.
They got
who are on the rosters.
Yeah,
that could certainly help. Dallas is desperate to get Finney Smith back. Dallas is just. You see how bad their defense is?
What an awful front office Dallas has. What an awful. They gave up on Brunson and Porzingis. I know Porzingis didn't play well there, but they gave up on both of them. Didn't. And they've ended up with Kyrie. Like, what what a step backwards, when you really think
Yeah.
about it. And you got to wonder, like, and Brunson played well there too. It wasn't like one of those things where he didn't play well with Luca. He played well
And
there.
you didn't even have
Yeah.
to pay him a max contract.
No, what a just a disaster of a front office that is. Complete disaster.
Yeah, they gave up 48 points to Giannis. He was like 20 of 27 from the floor. And in the
Yeah.
same game, they gave up 30 to Dame, who went 11 for 13.
Yeah, and if you play defense on Luca and Kyrie at all, you'll beat them. That's kind of the MO.
Yeah.
If you show any heart at all, then the next night, I think Milwaukee had like what, a 14, 15-point lead going into the fourth quarter and got outscored 41-12 to Utah. So they didn't fix their problems with their comeback against Dallas, that's for sure. Mike, let's dedicate this last part of the pod to Marcus Smart. And these are pretty simple questions from me, but I think we don't have to get too complicated here. Your favorite Marcus Smart moment?
My favorite Marcus Smart moment?
Yeah.
Gotta think about that, Jim. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, no, for me, it was it's because I love this team. The first round series against Milwaukee, he was hurt for a couple games, comes back. I think it was game 3. No, it was game 5. I think it was at home. Game 2, I forget what it was, but very first play out, he's out diving on the floor, and just gets the crowd just going completely mental. And I know he's had other great moments against Houston, and and then when he hurt his ankle and came back against Miami. But to me, that just showed the type of player who he really is. Immediately coming back from injury, first thing he does on the floor for a loose ball, and collects a turnover and just has the crowd lose their mind. And just winning plays, I guess.
Yeah, I guess for me, it'd probably be game 7 against Toronto in the bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Celtics were struggling offensively that game. And I want to say, how many threes did he hit? Was it 7?
Yeah.
In that game 7? Yeah.
But even better than that was that block on Norman Powell in that game.
Yeah, that's too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that transition. I mean, Toronto had all the momentum, and Marcus kind of just teed him up perfectly. And I think Powell had gotten a layup on him earlier in a similar situation, and this time Smart just played it perfect. It was just a great play. What was your initial reaction, Mike, when you found out he got traded?
My initial reaction was that I didn't like it because I didn't trust Porzingis to play.
Yeah.
So my initial reaction was that you traded your starting point guard for a guy when they had Rob Williams on the team too. And I was just like, they got 2 centers who aren't going to be playing in the playoffs. So that was my initial reaction. I hated it, and obviously things have worked out great. So that's good.
Yeah, mine was just disappointing because I when I heard they wanted Porzingis, I was excited because they needed that element. And there wasn't a lot of ways to go get it. When I found out it was Smart over Brogdon, when all day we were led to believe that it was going to be Brogdon that was heading out the door, that was gut punch. It was just so surprising. I think if I spent the day, I would have been able to rationalize it a little bit better when it happened. But I remember because the trade happened at like 1 a.m, like right after midnight or something, and the details started trickling out like 12:30 in the morning or whatever. And yeah, so that was disappointment, and just kind of whether you loved him or hate him, he was kind of the lightning rod for the team. He was the one that kind of energized the place, and you knew you weren't going to get that. And there's been moments this year where you needed a big play to kind of get the team going. You needed that extra hustle, and he would find ways to give it to you in a game like the Lakers. Whether or not it paid off at the end was a whole different story, but he would at least try to ignite that. And there's been times we've We've absolutely missed it. Mike, most underrated part of Marcus Smart's game in your mind?
His athleticism. I think
Yeah.
people never really took understood when he was fully healthy how athletic he was. His ability to block shots, grab offensive rebounds, just make pretty incredible plays in big moments. And then, it was really that. And I think his ability when healthy to run the point was something too that was underrated too when he was here. When they finally gave him the keys, he was actually a pretty good point guard.
Yeah, so I think the point guard thing for me, it was they went through, IT, Kyrie, Kemba Walker, and then finally he was given the opportunity to be a point guard, and he was pretty good at it. And he was effective for the most part. And I thought there were times in the playoffs he got exposed a little bit, but he did a good job, and he deserved the opportunity. I'm not sure if he's going to get that again, depending on where he ends up. Certainly, if he stays in Memphis with Morant, he's not going to be the guy. So, I thought that was an underrated element that he had. Last question for me, Mike. If Marcus Smart wasn't a part of that Porzingis trade, right? And it was Malcolm Brogdon going out the door. Do you think Drew Holiday is a member of the Celtics today? Do you think they trade Marcus Smart for Drew Holiday in the same way they did Brogdon going to Portland?
I don't think they do, but that would be disappointing because I think they had to make this deal in order to unleash Derek White, who's a better player than Marcus Smart. I think if Smart was still here, his personality and connection to the franchise would just take up too much space on the roster to allow for what we've seen from Derek White this year. And we can't have Derek White not playing in the fourth quarter, obviously, like we did last season. And so, and I don't think that Brad Stevens and his love for Marcus Smart would have saw a huge upgrade from Holiday to Smart to be willing to give up a first round pick as well. So I think it would have been really hard. I think the way it went down is how it needed to go down to get the roster to where it was. As much as I love Smart, I think it was time for him to move on and for the franchise to move on from him.
Yeah, I think you're mostly right. I think the Derek White element of this is the biggest thing to me, and that was kind of the silver lining when Smart was traded for Porzingis for me, and I continue to feel that way. White needed more opportunities, and for the most part, he's been really good. He has struggled of late, but for the most part, he's been really good, and I think clearly he's a better player than both Smart and Holiday at this point in their careers. And that's what needed to happen. And we'll see. The proof is in the pudding, right? This team, as constituted, the way they're built, they should win it all. If they don't, then clearly this wasn't just a Marcus Smart problem. They needed an inside right problem. There's something they probably have to look at longer and harder, unless an injury hits, then those things happen. But, Mike, hey, 5 games to the All-Star break. Trade deadline is Thursday. I think how we'll try to handle this, folks, is maybe we'll try to get out a pod Thursday morning or Wednesday at some point to talk about, the rumors we're hearing and, what we'd like to see happen. And then if the Celtics make any significant move, we'll obviously do another show to recap that, to talk about the trade that's made. If they don't, I don't know if we'll get another show on the board, but that's probably how we handle it, Mike, if that works for you.
Absolutely, Jim. And looking forward to the trade deadline. It's always exciting in the NBA to see what moves are happening. So we either have a pod Wednesday or Thursday, maybe some sort of reaction on Friday and Monday. So everybody enjoy the Atlanta Hawks game. I'm going to say it here before the pod's over. I hope the Celtics play with effort against Atlanta because Atlanta's actually playing really well right now. So it's not one of those games you can take lightly or you'll be adding another home loss.